what's a king without a queen? Here Arthur says to Merlin, my knights require that I marry. I have to get a wife. So he's not himself looking for a wife. He's not going around some medieval dating service or something. He says to Merlin, my knights require it. They think that something will be wrong if I don't marry. Which to some degree indicates, I think, a failure on Arthur's part. He's not burning with an ardent desire to find a wife. Something perhaps is wrong again with his whole vision of what makes a good wife or what he should be about. Merlin says, well, there are plenty of good women. And Arthur says, yes, but I have my eyes set on somebody in particular. Her name is Guinevere. She's the daughter of Leodegrance. And Arthur says she is both fair and virtuous. And Merlin says, yes, she's definitely fair. Which, notice, he doesn't say she's virtuous. He says that she is definitely fair, most beautiful, but she's wrong for you to marry, Merlin says. Why? Because she's destined for Lancelot. When Lancelot comes along, this woman will be the beloved of Lancelot. And yet Arthur forces his will here. He says, no, I will marry that woman. Notice this is a reduplication of something that came earlier. When Uther Pendragon says to Merlin, I will have Igraine, and Merlin says that's not how things should be. You know, that's contrary to nature and the will of God. And Uther says, I will have it nonetheless. And so Merlin's like, okay, fine, presto. And here it's the same thing. Arthur says, I will have Guinevere. She's the one that I want to wed, to have as my wife. Merlin expressly tells him, if you marry this woman, you will cause the ruin of everything that you put together. Because she's destined for Lancelot. You shouldn't marry her. And yet Arthur says, I want my will done, not the will of God or the will of nature or even what you are predicting, Merlin. I want what I want. And consequently, he insists that he's going to marry Guinevere. And Merlin says, fine, that's great, I'll arrange it. And so Arthur gets married to Guinevere, this beautiful young daughter of Leodegrance. And Leodegrance gives to Arthur a gift, quite a phenomenal gift actually. The gift that Leodegrance gives is a round table, which has been given to him by Arthur's father, Uther. It's entrusted to him by Uther. And then he gives it to Arthur. So in some ways it's like this is your father giving you a gift via Leodegrance, but still it's your father giving you a gift. Arthur never knew his father, remember, and Father Uther was gone long before Arthur became a man. So here it's as though something of manhood is passed down from the long-dead father to Arthur. Why a round table, though? What does that represent? Well, the circle, the image of the circle is related to the image of the ring. It's also related to the image of the sun. The circle is also the image of infinity. There's a classic image that was all through Europe called the Ouroboros. And the Ouroboros was a symbol of the dragon with its tail in its mouth, and that's an image of infinity. It's also the symbol of the sun, of the solar imagery, and so the consistency of the sun. Arthur is frequently associated with the sun god, the sun deity. He is the ascendancy of the sun. And notice also that the sun is most often associated with the intellect and with masculine power. So you've got a number of images working here in this round table image. And this is classic medieval symbolism. The medievals used conventional symbol, that is, symbols that were known to their culture at the time, but they also used a great deal of natural symbolism. And they would pull out the stops when it came to imagery and symbolism. Everything was fair game. Colors and images and numbers and names, all those things were symbolically used in the literature at the time. So the round table has the advantage of having everybody sit in equality around it. Nobody's at the head of the table. The head of the table was the prime position. I am the powerful leader of this group. And when you sit at the head, you are the king of the table. But at a round table, nobody's king. They're all equals. And so what Arthur creates is something like the first democracy. He pulls out of the chaos and the disorder of civil war, out of the violence, out of the the contentiousness of all these men, something that's like democracy. They're all brothers. They're all engaged together in a single operation, a single creation of civilization. And Arthur does it in some ways by force. But he does it with the primacy of the intellect, the use of the intellect to carve out a nation. And yet, the table, which has come down from Uther to Leodegrance to Arthur, only comes to Arthur because he marries this woman. So there's a strange symbolic irony going on here. If he marries Guinevere, he will cause the eventual ruin of his civilization because Guinevere is destined to love Lancelot and thus cause the civil war and the breakup of the court. But if he doesn't marry Guinevere, he has no round table, which is symbolic of the whole binding nature of this civilization of Camelot, a society that will have no end, so to speak. And thus Arthur is considered to be the once and future king. See, he is the king that sits not at the head of the table, but is the king who is reflected by all of his knights. All his knights are, in some ways, Arthur in another form. And Arthur is acting in concert with all these knights. And this image of democracy, this image of working together for a common source or common idea, becomes an image of civilization which is so powerful, so wonderful in the human imagination, that it actually repeats historically again and again. The British initiate this image, and it becomes dominant in the British imagination. It encourages things later on, like the Glorious Revolution and the ascendancy of Parliament and the signing of the various treaties that give more power to the knights. Magna Carta, for instance. All those things are part of that British imagination, that every human being should be treated equal. And of course, by extension, that same British thinking which comes over to our shores is indebted to this idea. Our whole sense of democracy in America, for instance, the idea that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that whole expression that John Locke puts forth in his writing, goes back to this medieval idea of a government that is a government of equals, of all men working together for a central thing. But notice also in this that Guinevere is almost like a prize. She and the table are a prize that Arthur gets. She's not really a beloved. She's not really loved for who she is. She's not really loved with a romantic ardor. She's loved in a way by Arthur because of what she can give to him and what he can gain from her. And consequently, from the very inception of their marriage, something is askew between them. Something is off between them. And that's why when Lancelot later shows up, she's ready for a knight that will be her beloved, because Arthur, in some ways, is, from the very start, something of a cold fish. Now, there are a couple things to note in that whole creation of Camelot, that whole creation of the Round Table. First off, is that the creation of Camelot is associated with the marriage of Arthur to Guinevere, but it's also associated with the knighting of Gawain, because Gawain asks to be knighted, to become part of the Round Table, on the day that Arthur gets married. So Gawain's knighthood and the marriage and the Round Table are all of them intimately bound up. Notice also that the knighthood of Tor, which comes at the end of this section, is very much similar to events that have occurred before. It's a reduplication of many of the events that have come before. Tor is the bastard son of a woman and an unknown knight. The unknown knight turns out to be none other than Pellinore, the same guy who went after the questing beast, the same guy who was another image for Arthur, the same guy who represented the chasing after the answers of the universe. And Tor is knighted by Arthur and discovers that he is the son of Pellinore, and all of that is associated again with that marriage of Arthur to Guinevere and formation of Round Table. So we've got marriage, Round Table, the knighting of Gawain, and the search for the questing beast, all tied together. And one last thing to consider here is that number of knights that are included here, 150. Why that number? Number symbolism in medieval society was very, very important, and numbers that appear are not accidental any more than they're accidental in the book of Revelation or they're accidental in the numbers of the Greek world. Numbers were considered a form of power, an expressive force of magic. And so 150 knights is an important number to think about. Why 150? And why, after the seats are all filled, is there only 2 left? Notice again that image of 2, number 2, that shows up again and again and again throughout the story.